visit a military hospital and you can see people who have lost limbs, or you can see it in communities where there are people suffering from things like PTSD that are less obvious to the eye. But you also see it downrange, and oftentimes we read the newspaper and it says 3 American soldiers killed here or there. But those are people with families that care about them, parents who love them. We need to think about that, and to make sure that if you're going to ask people to make that ultimate sacrifice, that they're not doing so in vain, that there is a real sense of the urgency about why we need to do this. It tears up to our safety. It's necessary to do so. There are the other alternatives in the toolkit of statecraft have been exhausted, and that you have an understanding of how to prosecute that conflict and how to get out, so that we're not just endlessly expending money and people's lives in something that isn't working. So we need leaders to think about those things and to recognize that. And one of the things that I would recommend is you go over to the newer parts of Arlington Cemetery, and you can see that cost. And again, if that cost is worth paying because it's necessary, I understand. My grandfather fought in World War II. He was wounded in action, was captured by the Germans and sent to a POW camp. And he suffered from his experience there throughout his life. Well, that's a cost that was worth paying. And lots of people, hundreds of thousands of people, suffered far more than my grandfather did. They gave the ultimate sacrifice. But for a war of choice, a war that tears up to some idealistic goal that's unrealizable, we really need to think hard about those costs. We think about Vietnam, and a lot of people are watching the documentary series, and you see some of the really bad ideas and bad incentives involved in the prosecution of that war. And you really feel for the 58,000 American lives that were lost there, and the hundreds of thousands of lives lost, innocent lives lost throughout the Vietnamese country, whether in the north or the south. And it's just heart-wrenching. But it's no different when it's on a smaller scale, when it's a place like Iraq or a place like Libya. And unfortunately, the United States did not lose a lot of people in Libya. But the fact is we've created a situation that has a cost there as well. And again, presidents and Congress need to think primarily about America's interests, but when we're trying to help people abroad, you need to think about what the consequences are going to be for those we're ostensibly trying to help. And oftentimes that has led to bad results. So in general, over the last 15 to 25 years, our foreign policy simply isn't working. It is not making us safer. And that's why we need to reconsider what we're doing. We need to rethink our grand strategy. We need to rethink how we're using diplomacy and economic levers of statecraft. We need to rethink our budgets and the types of platforms we're building and the types of missions we want to send our troops on. This is vitally important so that we can right-size the military for the challenges ahead. And I don't think we're doing that, which is why we need to bring new voices into the conversation. The other thing I think that we should ask for is I think we would like our executives to practice humility. That means that they need to understand what they don't know and to have that be part of the decision-making process. Sure, we can talk about, well, we're not sure what would happen, but we have to plan for it. Sure, but if you're really having to plan for so many things based on assumptions upon assumptions upon assumptions, you can have a situation in which you can't actually satisfy the conditions for...
Good afternoon, my name is John Michael Turner, and I currently reside in... Extremely hot and agitated. Some of us began messing around taking pictures, because there was nothing else to do. Finally, we were informed that we were closing up shop. I remember being thankful because it was over 110 degrees that day, and the hot water we were drinking was providing no relief. We started funneling into an alleyway to leave the area, and some locals on rooftops above us started firing their AK-47s at us. We took cover along the wall and were returning fire. We could hear other fire coming from another platoon just a few blocks from us as well. On the net, we could hear that they were taking small arms as well as RPG fire.
Roger that. We have no personnel east of our position, so you are free to engage over.
very distinct fire and a patch of 30mm candle. And again, over and over. It was very close. We need to move to that position now, came over the net. Myself and the team of soldiers I was with began running in the direction where we heard the patch of fire. I was not even close to prepared for the carnage that I was about to walk onto. I saw what appeared to have been 3 men on a corner. It was an extreme shock to my system that didn't look human. I know that they had to be at one time, but the destroyed carnage that I was looking at didn't appear to be. Then there was the smell. The smell was unlike anything I've smelled before. A mixture of feces, urine, blood, smoke, and something else indescribable. I saw an RPG next to one of the men in an AK-47.
We also have one individual, because we will need to hold the call away. You got a weapon down in there? We gotta just pick up a weapon. Come on, buddy. If we see a weapon, we're gonna engage him. Pushmaster, we have a van that's approaching and taking up the body. Where's that van at? Right down there by the body. Okay, yeah. Pushmaster, crazy horse, we have individuals going to the scene, looks like possibly picking up bodies and weapons. We need to start that. We need to get out of here. Roger. Break. Crazy horse 1, 8, resolution to engage. Picking up the load. Come on, let's shoot. Pushmaster, crazy horse 1, 8. Taking him. Pushmaster, crazy horse 1, 8. Roger, we have a flag and a shoot in our bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request bridge to engage. Lookmaster 7, Roger. Lookmaster 7, Roger, engage. 1-8, clear. Come on. Clear. Clear. Mark. Defend disabled. Let's do this. Low left. Lower left. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield. Alright, you guys are on the 54. I'm in the middle of that truck, so I'm coming about 12 to 15. Hey, when you go up there, put on the radio off. Radio? Yes, I've been absolutely right. So full, A4, so full. We go frequency. I just drove over a body. Yeah. Number 5043, change on 4. Maybe it's a visual thing about that back. Oh, they're dead, so. Van that was engaged. But if I got a kid,
Crying. I get crying. Not cries of pain, but that of a small child who had just woken up from a horrible nightmare.
yeah, it looks like we got some, the van that was engaged. But if I got a kid,
I saw that there was a minivan, and the cries appeared to be coming from it. Myself and another soldier, a 20-year-old private, walked up to the passenger side van and looked inside. The private that I was with reeled back, began to vomit, and quickly ran away. What I saw when I looked in the van was a small girl about 4 years old on the passenger side of the bench seat. She had a severe belly wound and was covered in glass.
we need to evac this child.
The glass was in her hair and also in her eyes. Next to her, half on the floorboard, with his head resting on the seat, was a boy about 7 years old. He wasn't moving, and from the severe wound to the right side of his head, my first thought was that he was dead. In the driver's seat was who I immediately concluded must have been these children's father by the way he was hunched over the children in a protective manner. There was no way that the father had survived. I immediately grabbed the little girl and screamed for a medic. The medic and myself went into a house behind the van. There was a local man hiding in fear in his kitchen of his home. I yelled out to him to help me. He stood up and quickly grabbed a bucket of water, which the medic and I used to clean the girl off. I pulled as much glass from the little girl's eyes as I could so that she could blink. The whole time thinking, fuck, what the fuck is her baby? My son was born May 31st, 2007. I had yet to see him. And I had a daughter who was barely older than this girl. The minute radioed in that the little girl needed to be evacuated because there was nothing else you could do here. I handed the child to the medic who then ran the girl to a waiting Bradley armored vehicle. I walked back to the van. I don't know why.